Good morning. Welcome to GS Nexus Current Affairs series. In today's session, our discussion will be around a report according to which India's carbon emission down by 7.93% from 2019 and its emission intensity reduced by 36%. So let's discuss the highlights of this report. India's total greenhouse gas emission in 2020 declined by 7.93% compared to 2019, while its GDP emission intensity fell 36% between 2005 and 2020, according to the new data submitted to the UN Climate Change Office. In its fourth biennial update report submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change on December 30, India said its total greenhouse gas emission, excluding the land use change, and forestry, amounted to 2,959 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent and 2,437 million ton carbon dioxide equivalent, including land use change, and forestry. Total national emission has decreased by 7.93% with respect to 2019 and increased by 98.34% since 1994, according to the report. The energy sector contributed the most to overall emission, that is 75.66%, followed by agriculture, that is 13.72%, industrial process and product use, that is 8.06%, and waste, that is 2.56%. In 2020, India's forest and tree cover, along with other land use, sequestered approximately 522 million tons of CO2, equivalent to reducing 22% of country's total carbon dioxide emission in 2020. The fourth biennial update report updates the third national communication and contains the national greenhouse gas inventory for the 2020. The report also embodies information on India's national circumstances, mitigation action, and analysis of the constraints, gap, related finance, technology, and capacity building needs. India has progressively continued decoupling economic growth from greenhouse gas emissions. Between 2005 and 2020, India's gross domestic product emission intensity reduced by 36%. Biennial update report are submitted by developing countries to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change every 2 years. They provide updates on greenhouse gas emissions, process on climate action, and needs for support in mitigation, adoption, and capacity building. In this report, it includes emission intensity, refers to the total amount of greenhouse gas emitted per unit of GDP. According to the report, the main contributors of India's total greenhouse gas emission were CO2 generated from burning fossil fuels, methane from its livestock, and increasing aluminium and cement production. India represents 18% of global population, but in 2023, India's primary energy consumption, listed as the third largest in the world, was 39.02 exajoule behind China and USA. Per person energy consumption in India is 27.3 gigajoule compared to 120 gigajoule in China and 277.3 gigajoule in USA in 2023. India's per person consumption is close to the average of southern African countries of 25.5 gigajoule and well below the world's average of 77 gigajoule. Please note, exajoule is equal to 10 to the power 18 joule. Now let's see India's nationally determined contribution target. As a party to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and its Paris Agreement, India submitted its first nationally determined contribution in year 2015, comprising two quantifiable targets. First, to reduce the emissions intensity of its GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030 from 2005 level. And second is to achieve about 40% cumulative electricity power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel-based energy resource by 2030. Please note that Paris Agreement is the first ever universal legally binding global climate agreement. Before the Paris Agreement, the world's only legally binding instrument for cutting greenhouse gas emissions was the 1997 Kyoto Protocol. Now let's see what is the recent scenario in respect to the NDC targets. India has progressively continued decoupling economic growth from GHG emission. Between 2005 and 2020, India's emission intensity of gross domestic product reduced by 36%. By October 2024, the share of non-fossil sources in the installed electricity generation capacity was 46.52%. Total installed capacity of renewable power, including large hydropower, is 203.22 gigawatt, and cumulative renewable power installed capacity has increased 4.5 times from 35 gigawatt in March 2014 to 156.25 gigawatt. As per the third national communication submitted by India to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in December 2023, the emission intensity of its GDP has been reduced by 33% between 2005 and 2019. India's forest and tree cover has constantly increased and currently stand at 25.17% of the total geographical area of the country. During 2005 and 2021, additional carbon sink of 2.29 billion tons of the CO2 equivalent has been credited. That's all for today. For more such videos, stay tuned to GS Nexus.